Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 24 of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum, where we'll discuss all matters relating to the challenges and opportunities of live streaming worship services and other events. Whether you're considering a one-way broadcast or an interactively engaging worship, your congregation's online experience should be top of mind as you plan your services, because while they may come for the community, the message, or the music, you have to keep them engaged so that they'll stick around long enough to hear them. So whether you're with us live or playing this back at a later time, welcome. If you're with us live on Zoom or YouTube, you can contribute to the show with questions and comments on our Discord. There's a category named Live Show with channels under it named Live Chat and Live Questions. And that reminds me, I have to go in there and make that happen. We don't look at Zoom's or YouTube's chat features during the show, except you'll find a link in the Zoom chat right now for joining the Discord if you're not already set up. There you go. If you're with us live on Zoom, you can stick around afterwards, after we're done, and participate in the post-show where we'll have casual conversation with open microphones. If you want to invite other people to join the show, you can find the Zoom and Discord registration information on our Facebook page, where we also post upcoming episodes. So who are we? We are a growing international and multi-faith community representing congregations of all sizes and faiths. For the topics that we discuss here, religious denominations should be transparent. We all want to communicate with our communities and do it as effectively as we can. So we're here to help each other up our game. And we're just one in a related set of communities that our panelists and I contribute to, all dedicated to all flavors of media production. So if you're hungry for more, look in the Discord under related shows. So media production, even for worship, is a rich and deep area of interest and continuing study. You can learn one way of doing things, or you can learn multiple ways of doing something, which offers you creative opportunities to improve your results, enrich your personal satisfaction, and make your work more interesting. So we have multiple training programs for you. Audio training with Mark Plukas and myself happen on Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're working on skills for mixing and listening and editing audio. And Joanna Lovell does an Audacity training on Tuesdays. And for this next season coming up, I'm working on plans to offer deeper workshops on audio and creative video switching and camera technique, as well as on-camera presence and other skills. So check out the training announcements channel on our Discord. Now, it's these interactive opportunities on Discord during our post-show, in our training classes, that really make this community work. The more you participate by asking questions, sharing your experiences and perspectives, the more everyone benefits. So without you, there's little point in us being here. So this is possibly the first time that an international community of church tech people has been so accessible, at least in my experience. So spread the word. Invite others to join the community, join our panel, contribute to the conversation, discover the resources we have for you on the Discord, engage with others during the show and after the show, and above all, ask questions. So any day of the week, you'll get good and reliable answers. The Discord is also how we communicate with each other and with you, the community, during the week with announcements, schedules, and more. Now, we're going to return to our regular weekly schedule on September 16th. We've been on a bi-weekly schedule during the summertime. Now, in 2 weeks from today, there will not be a show. We're going to skip 2 weeks and come back on September 16th. So we'll see you then. Now, before we get into it, I want to thank our panelists today. We have Joanna Lovell in Pennsylvania, Jay is not with us today. Leo Mendel in London, Michael Kyer in Seattle, Jeff Widgren in Kansas, Crystal Vakes and Rabbi Paskin, who are both in Florida. And we have some new people with us. We have Where'd you guys go? There's Rupert McCrae. Rupert, where are you located? You're muted, Rupert.
There we go. I am in Metro Dallas, Texas.
Oh, Dallas, great. And John Idelson is with us. Where are you hailing from, John? You're in California, right?
Beautiful Monterey, California.
All right, all right, all right. Well, thank you all for being here. And I know that there are many other people out there who are watching who are both dedicated and knowledgeable to working with worship technology. So if you would like to contribute to the panel discussion, all you have to do is get here an hour early on Thursdays at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Check in and we talk and we discuss the day, and you can contribute to the active conversation. That should be wonderful. So your questions and comments help steer our conversation during the show, so write them in. And remember that we're only looking at those on the Discord. So today we're looking. So we're looking at our technical priorities list for the build out project that we've outlined. We've got, let's see, we've got our internet service and our local area network in order. We've got our audio systems checked out, right? We're mixing for the room and we're mixing for the stream. We've got lights and we've got cameras. And if we chose this option, we have hardware video switcher. But now it's time to make sure that we have the computing power to run our software video switcher, merge our audio into our video, process our slides and our video clips, and feed all our video monitors and projectors in the sanctuary, and to run our streams. So, and we may also want to do audio or video editing on our computers. So how much processing power do these computers need? What's the difference between CPU power and GPU power? How much of each of these do we need? What accessories will we need to connect everything together, and which ones will help us make the production easier to manage? So that's the topic for today. It's going to be a good one, I think. Who wants to start off? So let's talk about the differences between Windows PCs and Macs for streaming computers. So I'm a Windows person.
And I'm an Apple person.
You're an Apple person, Joanna. Okay,
Yes,
you want to
I am.
start us off?
Not really, no, because I know
Oh,
David is also an Apple person, and David actually does stream through some of the more usable equipment. I do not technically stream. I'm just Zooming right now.
okay, great.
I am
Uh,
most definitely a Mac person. Yeah.
mhm.
I was actually, I've never really been a PC person. I was actually a Google, a Chromebook guy. My brother works at Google out in Cupertino or Mountain View, sorry. And so, I bought into that whole ecosystem, and then the pandemic hit and I tried using Zoom on a Chromebook, and it's a really crummy experience. And so I had to go back to my Mac, and boy, am I happy. It's a wonderful experience. It really is.
All right. Well, yeah, I know that there are people who love both platforms. I've been a Windows person forever, and I'm pretty good. I can set up a Windows computer to do what I need it to do, and I can disable some of the bloatware. And, it's really important on Windows to disable all of those little things, those services and those activities that go on behind the scenes that you don't even know about, that are constantly going out on the internet, checking for updates, checking for this, checking for that, licensing, and just all kinds of things. And it eats up your bandwidth. It eats up your CPU time. It eats up your resources. And you need to find out what they are, where they are in your computer, and how to disable them. It's a bit of a time-consuming thing. And I don't know if there are any guidelines for it that that have been written up. There must be some out there, but I haven't found any.
I can come in a little bit on this if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a Windows guy by background, I don't know that it was like a necessary choice for me back in the day. It's just kind of where my career led me, and that's what I've been focused on. But so long story short, I've been managing Windows for 20 years. But you're right. If you want to use Windows systems for production or really in any professional kind of environment, they do take some wrangling to get a lot of that stuff under control. Bloatware, whatever it is, all these apps that come with everything these days, and the services that you mentioned, but not just for the performance, not just for the machine performance reasons, but for the human performance too. All that stuff's just stuff that gets in your way, as a user, and particularly if you're setting up a system for maybe untrained people to come and use, or you just want something as simple as possible for somebody to come up and operate. You need to get rid of all that stuff so that they can get to what they need quickly. And there are ways to do that, and there are lists of stuff to do. I've actually found some, in corporate environments, you have big systems to help you manage that stuff. But when you don't have that, there is lots of example scripts that you can use. I found lots on GitHub that people will compile this stuff. Like, here are all the settings I've found that are useful. These are the PowerShell commands that disable the features. And, these scripts get accumulated and compiled into these really big, comprehensive setup scripts that you can, put all your switches of whether you want these features on or off, run the script, and it'll set up your, entire environment the way you want it, including your user interface. And so I've found some of those things not only like informative because it shows me a list of all the stuff that's available, but also as an execution tool to actually do it.
So you found some posts out there that have been guides for finding these things?
Exactly, yeah. Specifically on GitHub, and they've been the actual setup scripts that'll do it for you, but they're nicely commented with all the descriptions of all the features that are available to disable or uninstall, or useful things that are useful to enable or install.
Mm-hmm. And so how would somebody find those?
I can post some links, but there's like they're named. They're on GitHub, and they're named things like the ultimate Windows 10 setup script, for example. Or there used to be one called Windows 10 debloater, and I think what's out there now is sort of variation. These are forked off in different things. I mean, since it just come up, I'll try and find some links later. I can post.
Are they
in
reviewed,
the Discord?
Rupert? Are they reviewed by other people that this many people says this is a great thing? Or
I'd have to check. To be honest, I've spawned them off into my own ones, and I've been doing this a long time. I wouldn't run anything that wasn't good. I'm sure it's a minefield out there, so don't just go out fishing for some stuff. But I'll find some links and try and
Marty,
point some out.
Yes, David.
Could you maybe just share why do we have to get rid of all that stuff? Like, why do we have to turn all those services off?
Mm-hmm. Windows in itself, and Windows Explorer, and Microsoft Office, and many of the applications that we use every day will especially those applications that you've purchased, like plugins for DAWs or video editing, they will, when you open them up, they will contact their home server and check to see if your installation is properly licensed, and to see if there are any updates. And during that process, that communication, that's eating up your internet bandwidth, your local area network bandwidth, your CPU processing time in your computer, and can really slow things down. If it's just one application that may not make a big hit in your processing load, but if there are 5 that are going out there and checking at the same time, then it can slow things down. Crystal, you have something to add here, I'm sure.
I was going to say, one of the things you're also really missing as far as consumer grade PCs, like the kinds you go buy ready in the box, like Dell's and whatnot, they come with subsidized software. Basically, software companies, software manufacturers say, okay, well, I'll pay you X amount to put this on this build. So when you ship out the pre-build, it already comes with this software, like Norton's a real big one that you find. And if the second you find Norton, just delete it because it's trash. I'm sorry, it's garbage. But that's a perfect example, and it gets into your system and all kinds of other things. So these are things that, as Marty says, go out, gather information, do things, just get it off your system. The only thing I would kind of caveat on picking up stuff from GitHub, don't go out there willy-nilly. You will put, that's like putting a gun to your head. If you don't know what you're doing, you will hurt yourself. So
Yeah, well, let's talk about what GitHub is for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, and Jeff did have something to add, I think.
Okay.
Jeff has been waiting patiently.
He's been
So
waiting.
Oh, well, let's
I'll
do
watch
that.
people better than that. Sorry.
Part of my feedback would be well aligned with Rupert and yours as well. So, the Chris Titus is a pretty popular name out there. He's got a YouTube about the Windows 10 debloater, and it's been site's been hit about 1 million times almost now. A lot of trust, a lot of usage. I've used it's a script that a one button script if you want, and or a very selective process along the way that lets you do a little bit of choosing yourself. But it's amazing even how much capacity off your hard drive, your brand new hard drive, fresh install, can free up from temp files, multiple language files, and so forth that all get installed for just in case. But you wouldn't, at the end of the day, you'd never end up using them. And so it really does an incredible job of lightening the load and really building the efficiency. You can, you kind of clean it up, back up and clean it up as your starting line, or some people would prefer not to do that, and they'd rather overclock their CPUs and so forth, which is not a terribly healthy option either, kind of a dangerous ground to walk on, but it's a great place to be. But the fact is one of the very first steps in doing any of these things when you remove and clean and debloat and so forth is in Windows for sure, is to make sure you get that restore point set first and saved so that you have the ability to get back to where you were if in fact something goes awry, and you can try again, if you will. So just a word of warning.
Good advice. You, Rupert?
Yeah, maybe I can just tie those two points together, because you're right. New PCs, out of the box, particularly retail, will come up with a whole bunch of stuff. And yes, you can install it, uninstall it, whatever. Personally, for me, I just wipe it and reinstall base Windows and then start with the debloater, because like the debloater stuff or those types of scripts, they can uninstall the the third-party software maybe, but that's actually not what they're intended to do. That's just dealing with Windows itself. So if you're having to fight stuff that's pre-installed by a vendor, that's just time wasted. It's just personally me, I know not maybe everybody has got the time or the patience to do it, but it's always best to start off with a fresh plain Windows install and then build off from there. But so long as we're talking about Windows and particularly purchasing PCs or what options are available to customize what, it's important to remember that Windows itself comes in different flavors. You've got Home, Windows Home, which if you go to a retail store and buy a computer, it's almost certainly going to come with Windows Home, which will have more kind of stuff in it you don't really want in terms of apps and all that thing, but also will not have the ability to customize some of the features that you need to. That really puts you in the space of needing Windows Pro or Professional, which is typically a business level thing, but that will actually give you access to change some of the features that you need to. And in some cases, not everything that you really want to, particularly in terms of scheduling updates. So in some cases, to get the most control over that, you need to go up to the Windows Enterprise license, which of course can get more costly, but depends how much control you want over it.
Leo?
Yeah, Windows updates themselves have bitten too many of us, that blue screen of death, like a half an hour before the beginning of a show, like is killer. And while we're talking about, eating up bandwidth and bloatware and stuff, what about those live tiles that are always in the start menu when you get a new Windows computer? All those little video squares that, constantly updating video with weather and news and clips and stuff. That's data that's coming through the internet, and there's like half a dozen or a dozen of those in your start menu, and that's constant data streams. Leo, what do you got?
So the big thing I always take about this is streaming PCs, and this is what we're talking about, is computers for streaming. Should be one thing that they should not be is anything to do with the rest of your network. Whatever your IT departments say that they install, whatever they want to do, great, knock yourself out, go away. This is a streaming environment and isn't part of the corporate environment. You don't want them to have put on their virus checkers or anything else. And as the guys have already talked about, they talked about setting the PCs to default and clearing them down. And they've come up with great comments and reasons why you want to do it. But you need to think about the use case that this computer that we are talking about in this environment is for. And the use case in a production environment is that we are building it for a streaming thing. So all of the things that have been said, the things like Office that come with it, etc., you don't want. So that's the first case. The second case that was really important, and we hopefully will go on to next, is about the hardware itself. And why Windows gets a bad rap is that effectively you can buy a computer from anywhere that will do anything. The big difference is if you buy it underpowered, it will do that thing slowly. And in the streaming world, we can't do slow, because if you miss one packet, you're missing a picture. And so you need it to be up to speed and be able to perform in the job it's going to do. And that is a big difference, and where people sort of go, oh, look, that computer is this, that, and the other, and they cut corners. Crystal mentioned, Crystal and I have this discussion on various different times about the difference between building. She's a builder of a computer and I'm a buyer. And it's not quite a religious war, because we don't talk about religion on this show, but there is a huge difference in how you approach there. But at the end of the day, we both want the right components in there. And invariably, when you go to any of the big box stores to buy a PC, to meet a price point, there's literally guaranteed out of the 6 or 7 major components, they've at least scrimped on one of them to hit a price point, whether that's the disk space, the processor, the memory. They've always scrimped on something to get under the bar that they have to do. And when you put that back in place, whatever that bit that's missing, assuming you can, and if it's on a Mac, you can't, then you get back to the point when you actually have a streaming PC. And which is why when Crystal talks about them, and I'm putting words in her mouth, but she will hopefully would agree with me, when she builds them with a purpose to deliver. And that is what you've always got to aim for.
Well, I couldn't imagine a better serve up to Crystal to tell us about how difficult it is to build your own PC and what you would put in it. What components would you put in it? And for streaming purposes, what size or what capacity would you build in?
Okay, well, first of all, right now, I would not build a PC, period, end of story. We are currently in the middle of a semiconductor/chip crunch, thanks to COVID and other issues. So trying to purchase the high-end pieces or even the lower-end pieces right now is pointless. It's going to cost too much. You can buy a prefab way better, I think, in my opinion, based on everything I've seen. Because I know some of the older cards, like mine is going for like almost $1,000 now, and there's no way. 6 months before the pandemic, it was cheap.
When you mean card, what card do you mean?
Oh, video card. Anyway, but we're talking like forever ago. These cards should not be
Okay,
that
so
expensive.
but when people are looking to buy a PC off the shelf, okay, what are the let's review some of the important components that, you know, when you look at the specs for a computer, what are some of the things you want to look for? So, you know, the major component is the motherboard, right? And there are different motherboards.
I mean, yeah,
How much
I
difference
didn't.
CPU.
does one motherboard make versus another motherboard?
Okay, see, I did not know I was going to get called on the spot for this one, so that's super not cool. The big thing right now is that for me, for streaming, my big deal is get an Nvidia card. Nvidia cards are going to have the NVENC protocol, which is going to be a lot easier. Keep in
And
mind,
that's,
I'm
we're
also
talking about the
building.
graphics card that goes in that
Correct.
Also known as the GPU, right?
GPU,
Correct.
right?
GPU.
Graphics processing unit.
Yep.
The other thing I would point out is that I build gaming PCs because I stream to Twitch. So I'm always building the top of the top of the top of the line. So anything that I build is going to be overkill for most people streaming, because I want it to not only be able to stream, but to be able to game, and to be able to game and stream at the same time, unless you're just going to build two different systems, which I know people who do that, but that's not me.
Well, okay,
So
so that brings up an interesting question though for me. So, you know, how much difference is there between the demands that gaming puts on processors and the demands that you would have with, you know, bringing in 3 or 4 cameras to OBS or vMix, plus playing back stills and video clips and other things?
personally, I'm going to say in regards to a lot of weight on the graphic card. Now, keep in mind, I'm not running multiple cameras into high end, but I know that the computer in our sanctuary can run the 2 NDI cameras in, and does pretty sizably. Yeah, it does pretty respectably. You've seen Rob come in on a stream, and it's pretty solid. He can switch, no problems, etc. That machine could play Minecraft, maybe. It's not going to play like high-end games. You're not going to put Cyberpunk on that and have it run in anything at all.
Can I just help you out here, Crystal, quickly? So this is the all-important Bible when it comes to finding out about video cards for what we do, which is the Nvidia Video Encode and Decode GPU Support Matrix page. And it's pretty easy to find if you search for it. So if you search, so there's 2 things. NVEC, which is encode, that means converting something in so that it can actually be sent out. And decode, which, as you can probably imagine, means bringing it back in so that you can display it on a screen. So NVENC encode. And once you open this up, you get a list of all the video cards out there that they produce and what they can do. And it's the bit on the green. If you're, I apologize, they do it in green. So if you can't see it, and you can see, and the sweet spot always has always been is the 1050 Ti card. Is it Ti? It is, yeah, 1050 Ti. And the 1050 Ti card is the where you really start, because it's got green all the way across. And that means it can encode, and it can encode a maximum of 3 concurrent sessions. So if you've got to be able to deliver a multiple number of cameras and you're using OBS, you're going to use a multiple number of these encodes. So that is where the NVEC encode. Funny enough, one of the interesting points on the NVEC encode is that the professional cards, and these are the Quattro cards, which you don't normally see because gamers won't be so interested in these. The gamers, but they have an unrestricted number of encodes, so they can encode more things. And I don't know if you were not going to talk about this, Crystal, but the reason some of these cards are in high demand is that people like them for Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining has taken a lot of these cards. So that's that bit.
There's also the fact that Nvidia is specifically trying to combat the crypto miners. So there's a little bit more to it there. I mean, if you want to get into it, we should stay the hell out of SSDs because Chia is mining on those. So, crypto is going to
Marty?
be a thing. You just got to expect it.
Yeah, see, David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to, I know that we're not allowed to talk religion, so I'm going to try and be careful here, but for your money,
Yes.
a Mac Mini, an M1 Mac Mini is going to be the best buy.
I agree.
And these M1s are blazingly fast. They start at $700 for 8 gigs of RAM. I would definitely get the 16 if you can. But I actually wanted to follow this with a question, because if I were going out and looking for a PC for my sanctuary, I would not be looking up the fancy charts I would not be asking what's the video card in there. I would probably, the only piece of information I would even know to ask is i3, i5, i7, i9. What do I
Or
need?
M1.
So,
Right.
well, I'm on the PC side, right? It's those Intel. For a Mac, I would not buy anything Intel anymore, ever.
Right.
The M1 is a system on a chip. But on a PC, what are the specs, the bottom line specs that I should be looking for when I walk into Best Buy?
Because you mentioned the i5, the i7, the i9. Those are the central processing units, the CPU. And Crystal and Leo were talking about the graphics processor, which is the GPU. They're two different processors that are in a Windows machine. The GPU is running all of the graphics, all of the screens, all of the visual encoders and decoders. The CPU is crunching all the numbers, all the data, and it's doing a different set of tasks. And some applications are more place more demands on the CPU, and some applications place more demands on the GPU. Rupert, you had your hand up.
Yes. And then Jeff.
I was going to say that, hardware specs are important. We may want to talk a little bit more about that and all the performance metrics, of course, but that's just part of the buying decision, really. I mean, particularly when you're buying hardware that you're going to use in production. Now, I use the term production more widely than just AV production. We use production in IT terminology just to mean simply anything that's in service, that's actually doing a task. It's live in production. And that, if that's something that's earning you money or that is critical to your task, then there are other factors that play into your buying decision, what the overall service and reliability of that item is going to be, and the availability of expertise to work on it, the availability of replacement parts, because in production, what really matters is what happens when it goes wrong. You can have all the performance you like, but if it's only 85% reliable, it doesn't really matter. So the value is really in the insurances you can have in making sure that it's going to work when you need it, and when it doesn't, you can fix it quickly. So maybe that's a different part of the discussion, but I think it's an important part.
Agreed.
After
Yeah.
after
And I do
Jeff,
wanna
we
have
should hear
that-
from John because he's had his hand up for a little while now.
Oh, my apologies, John. Yes, let's
Jeff,
do
then
that.
John.
Go to
Okay.
Jeff and then John.
Okay, Jeff, and then John. Go ahead, Jeff.
So I guess I'd say you really shouldn't shop first. You should do some research on what software are you going to plan on using, because I think this question was around streaming, and some streaming packages work on both platforms. Some are Windows only, some are Mac only. I come from a Wirecast world back in the day on a Mac. They're both platform, they support both, but then I converted to a PC because I fell in love with vMix after putting it through a test. And so it was a software package, which was going to be that critical application for me that is a Windows only platform. So Mac isn't an option. I have 2 Macs sitting next to me. They're certainly contributors to my productions, but but as far as my critical app, vMix in particular, it was a Windows shopping spree or a PC shopping spree. I I was good. I made a lot of money in the early part of my life on Microsoft and Windows, and then I joined the corporate world in IT, and they usually often dole out Macs or give you a choice. And so I was on Macs for a long time, but I've gone back in the last 2 years. I've gone back to PC primarily. I think if you're going to be a PC person, you have to be a mechanic, and if you're going to be a Mac person, you're allowed to be an artist. I mean, you just have to have the brains and ability to keep up with it, either at a hardware level and or software level on a PC, and Macs really kind of keep you a few inches away from having to worry about a lot of that stuff in particular. But at the same time, that GPU over the last year and a half or two, that GPU, which is one you can go shop shelves full of them, you used to be able to anyways, pick out your GPU and put it in a PC, and you can't do that with a Mac. And so it's how much freedom you want with the components when you talk about how much memory and what kind of CPU and so forth. If you want that freedom by component, you go down the PC path. If you want a few choices of upgrades and pay through the nose, you shop Apple, and I say that in the most loving way. I love my Macs, but it's a very different model. But they've proven it out. It's Mac is that in between point. PC can scare the crap out of you when you're in production, and hardware switchers can let you sleep at night till the next day's show, and a Mac is in between. I kind of look at it in between. It's more stable than a PC, but it's not an ATEM. So that's all I got.
Okay, John.
Well, I want to follow up with Dave, and I think Jeff was a good introduction to this. First, I need to say that as a professor, I had to do Unix, Windows, Mac, so I had to learn them all. In my old age, I don't have any more space in the mind, so things have been falling out, like the codes for setting a modem. So I have focused on primarily, focused primarily on Macs. And I do that for total cost of ownership. So these problems you Windows people speak about, I remember them vaguely. But in my old age, when my Macs have not kicked me in various places as many times as Windows did in the past. Now, I think Leo came up with a good point. If you're going to have a streaming machine, you should build it to do that and not put other stuff on it. So right. I have Macs here that I would never stream on because I have customized it. I've got grandchildren's pictures on it. Who knows what I've got on it. So I want to stream with it. But when I talk about total cost of ownership, once you get a Mac running, doing what you need it to do, streaming, and we could talk about doing dedicated streamers, but get that. You may pay it a little bit more, but if you have Apple Care, you have a phone number. And if you know how to move up the tiers, you'll have somebody help you, but you're not going to have if you've got a PC that you build or pieced back together. But more importantly, I've had issues where I have a good backup of my Mac and how it's set up for programs. I've had a failure, and it's amazing. I could run to a store, I can buy one, I could put the backup on, and I'm up and running again. I've never been able to do that quickly with my Windows machine. So I don't look at the initial cost. I look at the cost over time and ease of use. And in my old age, the Mac has been much easier and more dependable than any of the Windows machines I built in my youth when I was broke.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is we're taking a few different directions here, and I want to try and focus because I know that people are looking for certain answers and certain information that I haven't heard yet. So so let me try and guide the questions here. So first of all, there's the first decision: do I go Apple? Do I go Mac? Do I go PC? So, and we've talked about some of the differences. Now, what I want to know, what I want to hear from the panelists here is, are there things that the M1 in particular, since it's so popular, can't do that a Windows machine can? Can you run Windows on the M1, and what would it take to do that? And what are the limitations? Leo, let's start with you.
Okay. So I'm going to reverse that question very quickly, but which is you can at the moment run Windows on an M1, but I don't think you will be able to much longer. That's my gut feeling, is these things are going to divert. The whole point is they're going to go upon. But I think it was brought up by Jeff and by others. The first question you've got to ask is, before you go out there, is what are you going to run? And we are talking about streaming PCs. We are talking about things for streaming. So let's forget about everything else and what a PC can do and what a Mac can do, because that's irrelevant. We've got to start talking about which software you want to use. And then really it comes down to some very simple choices. If you want to run vMix, you have to be on a PC. If you want to run OBS, you can be on both, but you're probably better being on a PC. If you want to run Ecan, you have to be on a Mac. If you want to run Wirecast, you can be on both. It works sort of on both. So they're your real choices. There are others out there. And Crystal, go on. Which one have I left off, Crystal?
Nothing. I was actually going to say one of the real easy ways to figure out what you should be building for is to figure out what your software is.
Yeah.
Then go to the software page and say, what's the specs for the best performance for the software?
And you did leave out Mimo Live.
I did leave out Mimo Live. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Is Mimo, and what's the software that controls the stream, the ATEM Mini? The Apple.
Mimo Live has a add-on for controlling the Mini.
Okay, so the other thing that you need to, one other part in there for vMix runs best on the Nvidia chipset. So once you've actually sat there and worked out your software decision, which is probably the most critical thing, because at the end of the day, you're not playing with a computer. You're not using the computer when you're in streaming mode. You're basically using the streaming software. That's a big, super difference to what you would be using in most cases. So you need to decide which is there. To me, that is your biggest first branching path of which way you make the decision.
So Leo, a question for you though. Should they buy a computer or should we run it in the cloud? Because now you could get a powerful vMix machine in the cloud for pennies on the dollar.
For what we are talking about, John, for houses of worship, you need the computer in the venue at this moment in time. At the moment in time, you need the computer in the venue. You need to be able to switch, because also what you need to do, and actually I've left off at, it's like you sit there and you forget, and as soon as you draw up a list, you always add another one onto the bottom of there. Marty, help me out. The software that does the screens in the sanctuary as well, which is better run on a Mac.
NDI?
ProPresenter.
ProPresenter. Thank you. I knew so. The voice from Jeff above comes through. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
ProPresenter, and ProPresenter again is prefers Mac. Although there is some people will argue you should have it on a separate Mac to the main Mac. That was my points.
And then the software I was thinking was Mix Effect Pro. Which is a Mac-only application that augments the ATEM Mini software.
Yeah, maybe that's a different. That's a different. I don't look at that as your streaming choice unless you're actually going hardware based.
It's not streaming, but it's video production. David?
Okay.
I just want to jump in and say that someone mentioned before, it may have been Leo, the suggestion to run ProPresenter on a separate computer. That's the setup that I have here. I don't use ProPresenter, but I basically have one computer the only thing that's open on this computer right now is my broadcast software, which is Ecamm and Zoom. That's it. I don't sync anything to this computer. I don't do any of that. And then all of the content whether it's a presentation or if I were using ProPresenter or websites or anything else, is on a separate computer. And then those are connected using a capture card, so I can bring it as an image, but that, or as a camera. But the basic idea is, again, if you're going to have a streaming computer, just let it do its job. Let it stream and use other devices for content.
Right. Okay. So now we've talked about how to select between PC and Mac, and that's basically looking at the software that you want to run and see which software works better or only on one or the other. Okay, so that makes that decision fairly simple and straightforward. And if you're choosing a Mac and something like the M1, you really don't have any choice other than of what is inside of it, other than how much RAM memory is in it. It's 8 or 16 gigabytes. You don't get to choose your hard drive. You don't get to choose your graphics processor. Just how much memory it is in it. And once you buy it,
as well, you can choose.
I'm sorry?
I think it has an 8-core and a 16-core. Am I right?
Does it?
No, it's the you don't get to choose your core. You can't customize it to your cores. You can choose 8 gig or 16 gig, and then different models.
And the 16 gig has more cores though than the.
Well, but I believe the number of cores is based on the model, whether it's an Air, a Pro, a Mini, as opposed to how many gigs. I think.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that.
Okay. So you have that choice when you buy it, right? And there's no upgrade path other than to replace the computer.
But you don't need to upgrade for a very, very, very long time.
Okay, well that's good.
And I want one thing I'd like to say about the Apple products in general. The fact that they all work together so beautifully amazes me. So I sit when I'm with you and I'm upstairs in my office. I have my iPhone, I have my iPad, I have a Mac, and a laptop and a Mac Mini. I can pop things from one thing to another. Everything is in the same ecosystem, and it works, seamlessly. That's all.
Yeah, that is really nice. The tight integration within the ecosystem of different Apple components. There is something to that.
Absolutely.
That is really nice to have. Now, so let's say you're working with software that where you need to have a Windows computer. And we've talked a little about GPUs, graphics processor units, and we've talked about the Nvidia processors or graphics cards. Why Nvidia? Why not AMD or anything else?
I would simply say most software developers develop to Nvidia as far as popularity goes, and so you'll find a whole lot more compatibility. But at the same time, there's vendors that their recommendations for hardware and so forth state Intel instead of AMD, and I mean, vMix, perfect example. All their recommendations are Intel based, and that's not the graphics card. Apologize, but I'm running an AMD, and it's a CPU that just sizzles. I've never had an ounce of a problem with it running the software. So, sometimes they're not. I mean, it gets into this fuzzier area. Are those hard specs and recommendations or not quite so hard? But they're the ones. What it really means when a software vendor develops towards a particular platform, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to work on a competitive, AMD versus Nvidia. It means that they've developed towards it and they've tested it. They haven't validated or tested or spent any time on that other manufacturer's competitive platform. It might run just fine, but they're not going to support it in a lot of cases. And so that's the other part of shopping as well as making sure. So I think it was Rupert who said, you have to have community out there, but you also need to have a solid support system as well. A lot of training
What about
resources.
when it comes to NDI? I've heard
Well,
that
before we
NDI
get
is,
to
is fairly
NDI,
particular.
hold on. Before we get to NDI, I know that Crystal's probably going to come in on this rather than I was going to come in. Come.
All right, go ahead, Crystal.
Leo, don't do that. If you're going to talk. I'll come in.
Okay. So the reason I put up the thing about NVIDIA earlier is the Nvidia Codex. And so
Right.
NVIDIA built the encoding in the chipset. It's an addition. It's not in there. That instruction set does not exist in the AMD chipsets.
Right.
So the manufacturers are basically utilizing something that physically only exists in NVIDIA and it doesn't exist in AMD. And there has been a split in the market again, as so Apple took a decision to move down the AMD, which is the Vega something I can't think it is, path a number of years ago. But I don't actually know what's in the M1, if it is if it's an AMD Vega or if it's completely their own instruction set. I honestly don't know, but there is reasons why, particularly that both OBS and vMix have written special drivers to do it. Another good example of this is Handbrake. If any of you use Handbrake, you'll see that you get different versions of Handbrake, or you get different, when you run Handbrake, it will use different instruction sets when you're doing the encryption or re-encode of a video. And that's the reason.
Crystal?
I would also point out that this is another case where you go back to the software and look for the recommended, because as Leo rightly points out, OBS is going to just love you if you throw an Nvidia at it. If you throw an ATI at it, it's going to go, it'll do what you need it to, but it's not going to do it as well. If you're using OBS, you want to be on Nvidia, period. It's an end of story. It's also kind of the whole Intel versus, the Ryzen chips and whatnot. It's a bit of the competitive, they one up each other every so often. Like right now, the Ryzens are tearing holes in the Intels, I would say personally, but that's why they're $6,000 for the high-end chips, which are 64 core, which is why I say the stuff I want is way overkill for streaming.
Yeah. But I do think that there are differences in the instruction sets. So
yes.
Leo talked about the drivers, and those are related to the instruction sets. So the software can call different instructions to do different operations on the video and the video data. So I have a situation here. I have two computers here at my desktop. I have a new gaming computer with an Nvidia graphics card in it, and I have an older business computer with an AMD graphics card in it. The Nvidia graphics card can generate NDI signals and receive NDI signals, no problem. The older business computer with the AMD card can receive NDI video, but it cannot generate NDI video. And, so I can only send video in one direction between these two computers. And from what I'm told from people that I've talked to, that's because the AMD card is missing the instruction sets. It doesn't have the right drivers in it, and they are up to date.
It's not drivers, Marty.
Not drivers?
It physically doesn't have the right code inside. It doesn't have the right instructions. It's like saying this car doesn't have a turbo. Can I make it go as fast? It's like, but it doesn't have it. It just doesn't have it. And that's all it is. It's it'll still burn through the fuel. It'll still do everything, but it's the video card is the turbo that you add on.
All right.
Go Bert.
That's the key.
So I'm hearing general consensus that if you're going to buy a PC, it has to have an Nvidia card. Now, you have choices when it comes to desktop towers. You'll buy a PC that comes off the shelf and you can look at the specs and you can verify whether it has an Nvidia card in it. If you have an older PC, you may be able to replace the video card in it and put a newer video card in it. What about laptops? Laptops are kind of like these M1s. You really can't swap components out in a laptop like you can in a desktop tower. So you really need to look at what's in it when you buy it, right?
Well, yeah, but this is one of those things that I've, have said about when we were talking about the fact that computers are always limited if they're trying to keep the budget. And laptops are probably the biggest example of this in my mind, and always have been. They've always been aimed at a price range, and there's always something that why they're limited. Laptops are great for moving around. Laptops are great if you're sitting at home. This is not that world. This is the world of streaming. And the world of streaming is a desktop. Not only that, the worst thing that happens when you get a streaming laptop in a house of worship is someone goes, oh, look, that laptop's free today, so I'm going to just borrow it for doing something. And when it comes around to your service on Sunday, you will find that laptop has got something installed on it that has now broken the most important and the only job it was supposed to do.
David.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there that I am streaming on a MacBook Pro, a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and the M1, and it works fine. I intentionally, though, got a laptop so that I could, because I don't always stream from the same place, I wanted to have the same software on it. But I will say that one of the big problems that I run into with laptops is ports, especially on Apple products. I have 2 ports on this ridiculous computer, which is insane. So it's also important to remember what do I have to plug in to this device that I'm using. And I use a CalDigit TS3. There are a bunch of Anker actually just announced today, I think, a Thunderbolt 4 dock, 12-port dock. But if you're going to be plugging in one or multiple cameras, if you're plugging in an audio interface, anything else, especially on laptops, be aware of the shortage that you may have of ports in order to plug everything in.
Right, and we're going to get into accessories in a bit.
Okay.
Let's stay on the basic computer first. Rupert?
Just another consideration as well as ports is heat. I mean, you can get quite powerful laptops, but when they start working hard, they need to dissipate the heat and get some airflow. So you'll find the fans ramp up pretty fast, or they can, and they're small fans, so they have to make they can make a lot of noise to try and keep those units cool. And there's some variations, and you can sometimes have those same problems with desktops, but in a desktop environment, you've got more options to work around that. If in a laptop and it's sitting right there and is making a bunch of noise, it's can be a challenge.
Heat is definitely a concern for every piece of electronic equipment. John?
Oh, I just, we are live on August, 27th?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've read any of the press, there's rumors that Apple's going to announce some new stuff. So I probably wouldn't buy any Apple computer unless you absolutely needed it. And my suspicion is there will be an M1X, and some of these old M1s, the one that David talked about, will be available at less of a cost. So as we're talking about hardware, I would just say, don't buy it today.
Can I, Marty,
good advice.
Can I also I just want to build on what Rupert was saying, because it's so important. The power for power, pound for pound, the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro are very, very similar. They've got the same system on a chip, but the one thing the MacBook Air is missing is a fan. Now, having said that, I've been streaming. I mean, I've been streaming on this MacBook Pro today for at least 6 hours, and the fan has not turned on once. It's warm to the touch. It's not hot. So these are very, very good, powerful machines. but knowing that you have a fan for if you need it is a really important consideration, because streaming is incredibly taxing on the system.
Good advice. So what about the processors? So we talk about the M1, the i3, the i5, the i7, the i9. Can anybody talk about the differences in what we should be looking for? Or is there a minimum? Is there a threshold?
I'm going to talk to the minimum of it, and I'm going to ask the rest of the panel. You're going to have to raise your digital hands because I can't. There's too many, and I'm the only one who's spotlighting, so I can't see them. You've got to be minimum of i5, although I would actually recommend i7.
I would second
you're
that.
just going to cut yourself off if you go any lower. Crystal has actually mentioned that the AMD processors bang for the buck actually work out a much better thing in certain areas, especially for streaming. And as said, you can get machines which have already got it. On that point, and I'm going to have to do this now, I'm afraid, because my phone is overheating. We always things. I want to just show you very quickly a machine that I buy all the time. This is, I think, the 9th of these that I bought for streaming. So hopefully you can see my phone. So this arrived today. This is, and let me just turn up my gain so you can actually hear me a bit louder than you would do normally. So sorry about this. Hopefully you can hear. Right, so this is a Dell. This is a machine, a Dell T55820. And the reason I buy these machines, these PCs in particular, is they're built as workstations to do things like streaming. And this one is built to stream. And the reason it's built to stream is it has all of the PCI slots that you need. So this has 2 or 5 PCI slots where most machines only have 3, which means you can put in the extra graphics cards and the extra streaming cards that you need. The hard disks are at the front are all removable. The power supply is removable as well. You've got a little tab, you take it out. This has 32 gig of RAM and 8 processors, and you can pick these up secondhand on eBay for about $1,000. And they will absolutely tear away at streaming because they are built for workstations to do it. And as I say, the T55820 they are. I just confirm that. Yeah, T55820. Hopefully you can see that there. And as I say, the hard disks are completely removable. And they run, literally, these machines run silent even when they're at full speed.
Yeah, you pointed out a couple interesting things here that I want to touch on, but let's go to Rupert first.
I was just going to agree with Leo that Dell business class equipment, enterprise class equipment is very accessible on the used market. And I have been, for as long as I've been a Windows user and administrator, I have been a Dell user and purchaser, and I'm a big fan of Dell equipment. And in fact, in these kind of any kind of production environment where I have to put my name on something, I'm really only going to suggest Dell because they have the best warranty and service, and really the only, in my opinion, and certainly one that I can count on. And like John's point about Apple Care, great, you can go to the store, you can do that stuff, they can do it. With a Dell warranty, if you get the next day option or even the same day option, I can pick up the phone and a tech will come site, swap out the thing, do the thing, and I'll just be back in business. That's the beauty of Dell equipment.
That's really key.
I'll agree with that totally.
Something I want to just touch back on graphics cards. So we talked about the Nvidia card and the fact that the card has a processor in it specifically for video, but that card also has memory in it. So in addition to the RAM that's on the motherboard, the graphics cards have memory to them, and you can buy the graphics cards with different amounts of memory in them. And again, looking at the software that you're going to be running, And I'm going to take DaVinci Resolve, which is a video editing software, as an example. The specs specifically call for an Nvidia card, and specifically calls for a minimum of 8 gigabytes of GPU memory in it. And a lot of off-the-shelf machines will come with less than 6 gigabytes of memory, and that's one of the things where somebody was talking about cost-cutting measures that manufacturers will take to put a product, an off-the-shelf product, under a price point, and that's one of the places where they cut those corners that you got to watch out for. Now, the other thing, one of the things that Leo showed us in his Dell machine was he pointed out the power supply. Power supplies are really important because if you're going to put cards in there, if you've got, you're running things, you've got to make sure that there's enough power in the machine to run it without overtaxing it. And how do you know what size power supply to put in there? They're rated in watts, and as you look at different specs, you'll find 200 watt power supply, 800 watt power supply. How do you know what to look for, Rupert?
So I take the same approach to this as I do with car batteries on my car. I don't get the battery that calls for. I go out there and measure the space, and then I go buy the biggest battery that will fit in that space. The same thing is true of tower PCs. I'm not so concerned about how much power I need. I really just want to put the biggest power supply in there I can and just work it much less hard than it needs to run. And I've got the headroom, and I know I'm never going to push it. The fans will be in there that are designed to, keep it cool at whatever load, and I'm never going to push it that far. So there's just going to be that much quieter.
Cool. Okay. Is there anything
Crystal?
else that people want to add? Crystal.
One of the immediate things that jumps to mind is that when you're looking at PC specs, the big thing you need to remember, RAM is the memory on the board. VRAM is the video RAM. So VRAM and RAM are two very different things. So when somebody says it's got 8 gigs of RAM, that doesn't mean that's got 8 gigs of VRAM. Another thing I would point out, just for those of you who are thinking, even considering building right now, if you're not familiar, I'm going to try to share screen real quick. I don't know how well this will work, but I'll try. All right. This is PC Part Picker, and I highly recommend it. It's pretty straightforward. Hopefully you can see that. Yes, no?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. This gives you, they do different types of build guides, and these are really straightforward. That way you can see an AMD gaming build, a gaming build, a gaming build, admittedly, but it also says streaming build, and they do have several streaming builds, and you can get the shiny, pretty ones where they have the colored lights and all that. But if you're a complete newbie and you've never built a system before and you're terrified to pick stuff out, this is a really good place to start. Whereas, otherwise you're going to hunt around and try to figure things out. If you have more season, you're more familiar, this is going to be like whatever. But it's a good place to start. And the other thing that's really nice with it is that it gives you the option. It gives you pricing. It does try to do the best it can in terms of trying to find you the best pricing options currently available. These fluctuate every few hours, but it's a thing to keep in mind. PCPartPicker.com. So there you go.
Cool. All right. Let's see. So we talked about Macs. We talked about Windows. Joanna, are there any questions that have come up?
I don't see any questions. We've been chatting a little bit in the show chat channel. Really mostly just reiterating things that people are talking about.
There was a question I saw about whether I did see something about can someone talk about Linux as an OS rather than Windows or Mac OS?
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
That's
Okay.
all right. It's okay. Yeah. I would argue on this one, the important element is the software you're going to run and not the operating system. And in streaming environments, in shared environments like a house of worship, it's to ensure that the maximum number of people can actually use it and not a limited number of people get frustrated with it. So I would stay well clear of Linux in a streaming environment, in a shared PC that's going to be used by a house of worship that you want it to work on a Sunday morning.
That's a
All
valid
right.
point.
Yeah.
Linux is great if you want to compile your own OS.
Compile your
that's-
what?
Compile your own OS, but I don't recommend it in a production environment.
No,
That's-
Leo's right, and there's many hands on these PCs. They're going to pass through multiple volunteers, and so it needs to be, the ease of use has to be considered for sure.
It could be different in different faith communities, but the idea of a synagogue or a temple building its own computer, and I mean, we get exhausted going to the store to buy a new computer. It's so foreign to us. What we want is someone to say, buy a Dell i7 or higher, just tell me what to buy, right? That's which is one of the reasons why I have no qualms about saying, if you're in the Mac world, get an M1 Mac, a Mac Mini, right? It's simple. Like, you don't even have to think about it. Just do it. On the PC side, I can't answer that question, and I'm fascinated by all the discussion about building. I just don't see that happening in the Jewish world. I don't know if it's different in other faith communities.
Rupert?
Yeah, and that reminds me, I know John asked Leo earlier whether we need to include the cloud, in this discussion, and whether the cloud's the future. Well, it might be later, like Leo says, but for right now, we need to be looking at, computers on site, which is true. But the future may be different. So the question is, at this moment in time, do you go down the build your PC route, or do you get something that works out of the box right now that will take you into the future, where probably later something else will apply, some cloud kind of solution? It's about the choices that are relevant at the point in time.
Yeah, I think you need a certain amount of knowledge to have the confidence to build your own computer, and make sure that you know how to find the right parts and where to get them, and what the specs should be, and all that. But there are so many off the shelf, or so many companies that are putting PCs together for people and then selling them, right off the shelf. And there are enough places to get them now with the internet that if you know what you're looking for in terms of all the parts that are in it and the specs, then it's easy enough to find something that fits your needs and buy it right off the shelf. And when you do that, it also comes with support, which is a really important thing. John Idelson, you're muted.
Sorry about that. This discussion was great. And it convinced me, if I'm ever going to buy a Windows machine, I just have to hire Leo. And if I'm going to build one, now I know who I want to build it for me. I'm with Dave, and it might be just because I'm lazy I should say, in my old age. The simpler it is, the easier it is for me to make that decision. When we're working with volunteer groups and things that are not used every day, I try to have the least moving parts. And I might argue that for streaming in some of these settings, a dedicated box that streams may be the way to go. An ATEM mini and the stream that goes up.
Depending on the platform you're using, that doesn't work if you're going out to Zoom. Leo, and then I want
to make it go.
Let me say this before I go to Leo. If anybody out there has questions about PCs and what to look for and specs and needs and software and that kind of stuff, put them in the Discord, put them in the questions channel so that we can get to them. After Leo, we're going to move on to those things that we connect to the computers.
So all I'm going to say is that I have to say this because of what Rupert says. When he said that the cloud is in the future, for this community or this discussion to be saying that in the future we'll be talking about a cloud solution sort of makes me laugh.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of things that the cloud can do for us. There's a lot of economics when we need to scale up our operations to get, you know, bigger with more cameras and more locations and remote locations and
That
remote
isn't what I
country.
mean, Marty. I'm
That's
talking
not
more
what you
about
mean?
cherubs on the. I mean more about cherubs on the clouds is really where I was going with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think for our community here, I think we're talking about on the ground, under the desk, you know, in the room. We're talking about hands-on control here. I think that's it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Now let's talk about what we connect to these computers, because there's a whole lot of stuff that we got to connect to these computers. We've got keyboards and your choice of a hand control, whether it's a mouse or a trackball or a trackpad. We've got, you know, how many monitors do we need hanging off these things? And then, you know, if we're going to hang a hardware switcher, and then we've got cameras, and then we've got, you know, button pads that make it easier for us to control all this stuff. Let's talk about how those all get together. We mentioned that, you know, if you're working with a Mac, you may have, you know, 2, maybe 3 holes in the side of the box where you can connect stuff to. So we need to hang other stuff that we can then connect that stuff to. You know, with Windows, you generally have more ports in terms of USB 2 or 3 or C or something like that. But even then, they may not be enough. So let's start that conversation off with David.
Cool. So I'll share with you a few different peripherals that are absolutely essential to my workflow. The first I mentioned before is this CalDigit TS3. There are lots of different versions of it, but some sort of interface so that you can plug a whole bunch of stuff in. I think every streamer knows about the Stream Deck. This is the grand poppy of them all, the big guy. There's also a smaller one with 15 buttons, and then there's a 6-button version also. This is basically a hunk of plastic with some pretty pictures on keys that you can press and control different things. So for example, when I change scenes, when I mute or unmute, when I raise my hand, when I screen share and Zoom, I'm doing all of that just using a Stream Deck. I haven't actually touched my Zoom window once this entire meeting. It just makes it push button simple. Another thing is, you mentioned monitors. This is called pluggable, especially if you're on a Mac. Depending on your model, you can only get 1 or 2 external monitors. I'm on my MacBook Pro right now. I'm running I got 2 external monitors plus the one that's built in, and one of those is using this pluggable guy. It basically takes an HDMI, turns it into USB, and it works flawlessly for me. And the last thing I'll mention, and this is specific for prayer leaders, is this little guy right here. It's a Firefly, page flip Firefly. I actually have the Dragonfly here, which has 4 pedals. The reason I love this is because I'm a musician. So when I lead services, I'm not only am I switching, you know, scenes, I'm also playing guitar. And so I put this on the floor, connect it up via Bluetooth to my computer, and I can advance slides if I'm using a PowerPoint for visual prayer. I can, if I'm using, you know, Sibelius for musical notation, I can advance using this. Having a foot pedal to be able to move through things so that my hands can be free, either to play guitar or to just be expressive in my leading, has really been pretty powerful. So those are some of the peripherals that I find really essential.
When I think of foot pedals, I think of electric guitar, David. I think you're going to start rocking out with all your foot pedals, right?
Oh yeah, baby.
Marty,
have-
you're on mute. Okay,
I
J-Lo.
Thanks, Leo. I'm pretty simple here. So I'm always been a mouse person. I do not like a trackpad. I prefer a mouse. I prefer to keep the mouse and the keyboard Bluetooth so that you don't take up as many inputs on your Mac Mini. So even though I have a Mac Mini and it has more ports than a laptop, I still wanted to conserve the ports. And I wanted to hook up 2 monitors. So I actually have one older monitor and one newer monitor. So I only had one HDMI out. So I bought a little, I guess this is a female USB end, right? Or a female lightning. Sometimes that gets confusing on a Mac, whether or not this is a lightning port or a USB port. So this comes out of the USB port, turns into HDMI. The idea was that I would use an HDMI monitor and the VGA monitor, a good old-fashioned VGA monitor. However, it doesn't work coming out of the one port. But it does work to change this to a VGA. So I go HDMI out to the newer monitor, and I go VGA out to the other monitor. Voila, I have dual monitors. So that was a little workaround that I had to get past. But because there's not, even though that Mac Mini has more ports, it's still not going to be enough. And I have a little USB hub out in front too for all my Bluetooth connections and all my other USB products that I use, my USB microphone and such. That's all.
All right. Leo?
So I'm going to slightly contradict J-Lo, and that is on a streaming PC that is going to be in a house of worship. I would always spec it with and supply it with wired keyboards and wired mouse. The fact that you want, the number of times that you want to sit there and worry about batteries running out when you're right in the middle of a service is 0. You don't use the computer most of the time. It's not in use all week, and you want to make sure these things work. Wired keyboards and mice are 100 times more reliable, and when you want to press go, you don't want to have to press go twice. And on
That's true.
wired, you never, ever,
That's
ever
true,
have
but you
that
might
problem.
already be keeping batteries in the house for, a Beta 58 handheld battery,
Disagree.
you might already
Disagree.
have batteries. So you
Everything-
change batteries at the beginning of each performance if you want.
I love you,
because-
J-Lo.
My
but-
batteries don't run out for like months and months and months and months. But
Until they run out. They will last for 3 months or longer for the cost of it,
I don't know.
and the use on streaming environments.
That's like
Any production environments, you should always use wired. It's the one area where you should always use wired.
Yeah, I'm sorry, J-Lo, I love
That's
you,
all right.
but
That's all right.
Murphy's Law says if it's gonna fail, it will. The one thing that is most likely to fail will, and if you have a choice between, and this goes for microphones as well, if you have a choice between wireless and wired, there is no choice. It's always wired. If reliability is important to you, why take the chance?
I wasn't
Yeah,
talking
right.
about the Ethernet. But
That
okay.
and you just don't want to be in the middle of a bunch of people with their cell phone Bluetooth enabled and have Bluetooth peripherals, and then you've got Bluetooth collision. And let's just not do that and say we did. I love you, J-Lo, desperately. You are my
That's
bestie
okay.
girl.
That's
but-
all right. That's all right.
Absolutely perfect at home. You're dead on. At home production, totally fine.
Okay.
Church production, nope.
Oh, and I would love for Jeff to repeat what he said before about the difference between PC people and Apple people, because he complimented my artistic ability in there somewhere. He used the word art, and I really like that. Do you remember what you said, Jeff?
I said if you're a PC person, you've committed yourself to being a mechanic.
Yeah,
And if you're an Apple person, you're allowed to be an artist.
that's it. Right there. In a nutshell, it does. It frees you up to be creative, and it always has.
I think
Totally
it's called
disagree with
starving
that.
artist, Jeff.
It's always the art department at the record company. I used to work at a recording studio that was owned by a record company, and we, as a recording studio, were the only people who used Apple except for the art department upstairs.
Hey,
were the
there's
only
What
other
I-
people who used Apple.
What I
so.
think is great is this is a program about religion, and the only arguments on religion we have are about
Apple and Windows.
Mac to PC.
Or coffee to tea, or coffee to tea.
Coffee.
Unitarians is off.
Oh,
Can we
Cool
talk about
versus
Commodore
beach.
versus Atari, please?
No, Mark.
PS, PlayStation
And we have
versus
now
Xbox.
devolved. We have now devolved into.
Marty Rupert is.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Well, I'm unfortunately going to weigh in on the keyboard and mouse debate, but for production in critical environments, wired, you just cannot get more reliable than wired. But I think there can be some variations, because I actually do have a wireless mouse, but I have a wired one right next to it that is plugged in also. And if this fails at a moment's notice, I can go to this one.
Wow.
I can go to this one straight away. You can have two mic. It won't give you
We're
two.
just prepared. You're
It
very
won't give you
prepared.
two cursors, but I've got immediate standby, and so that's a variation. I also have the receiver for it's not Bluetooth. It's 2.4, or it's not 2.4, but it's not Bluetooth. But I have the receiver for it on a USB extension 6 inches away from my mouse mat.
Yes.
So I'm getting the best possible, reliability in there, and I have the immediate standby of a wired mouse. I just like the freeness of a wireless mouse, and I can buy the quietest mouse that I've been able to find happens to be a wireless mouse. So that's another reason I use it, but there is no reason to use a wireless keyboard at all.
So I'm hearing an echo of myself.
So I think this is a 2.4, like you were talking about, Rupert. Maybe this is not Bluetooth. This is the other end of the mouse and the keyboard. Is that a 2.4 or is that Bluetooth?
If it's like that, it's unlikely to be Bluetooth unless that happens to be a Bluetooth dongle. But it's either
No.
Yeah, I've seen Bluetooth dongles that look like that.
Right,
That's not
right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'll have to check the settings. It is easy to lose, that's for sure.
Yes, they are.
Marty, I was
have
not hearing
thrown
any
away the amount of mice that I've thrown away because that bit is lost is in bucket loads.
Yes.
Let's not contribute to the e-waste problem. Thank you. We have a bad enough ecological problem as it is.
That's another reason to not use batteries in a mouse.
We have
another
artists
reason not
that
to
take
use
care of
Apple.
eco-waste. Art is your solution to eco-waste.
So I'm going to try and ignore my echo because it's going to drive me crazy, but I'm going to try and. So I'm pretty particular about my keyboard and mice. And my keyboard right now is driving me crazy because it's so loud. So I've been investigating keyboards and specifically the switches that can go in these keys. There are so many, and Crystal will be able to relate to this because it's big in the gaming industry. Keys are very particular. They have a different touch, they have a different feel, they have a different sound. And when you're gaming and you're using your keyboard, it's like the difference between winning and losing. And so I'm looking for a quieter keyboard. Now I'm using the Microsoft ergonomic keyboard, which is that guy right there. And I kind of like the way it's laid out. My hand positions are good. It's just loud. It's just loud. And as for mice, I have been using the Kensington Expert Trackball. I love this thing. It's got this huge ball that allows me to be really precise about where my cursor is. It's got 4 buttons on the side, and then it's got a ring for scrolling. And all of these buttons in the ring, they're all programmable in software, so I can make them do whatever I want them to do. And with this, my wrist doesn't move. It's just all in the fingers. So it's really comfortable, it's convenient, it's accurate. And the size of the ball itself, they have smaller ones, they're just not very accurate. So I like this a lot. Then I've got my, where'd it go? I'm going to go back to my phone. So then I've got my Stream Deck, right? Which we can talk about. I'm sure we can all talk about Stream Deck. And I have some I'll show the software, the Stream Deck software, the companion software. I got to get rid of this echo here first. So somebody else go ahead and pick this up.
I'll just jump in and say that I have never been someone before said they don't like trackpads. I've never been a trackpad guy. I've always been a mouse guy, and my mouse of choice is the Logitech MX3. I think that's what it's called. It's a great little mouse. It is wireless, but I have a plug here that every night I just plug it in. But I actually just recently got myself one of those Magic trackpads, and what I love about it on my the reason I got it actually is so that I could do stuff like this easily. I could probably do this on the with the mouse, but because I have the trackpad, I can zoom in anywhere I want really easily and move the page around. It's just really nice and convenient, and I'm getting used to it. It's not too bad.
I'd have to second David's opinion about the MX Master 3. Outrageously good mouse. The ballistics on the scroll wheel are terrific.
Have you got that mark to hand? Can you just hold it up? Which one is it?
It's the
Okay,
Logitech MX Master 3.
I have the wired version of it.
Yeah. This one, you can actually switch between various computers that you're controlling, all with the one mouse. There's all kinds of cute features on it, lots of whiz-bang little scrolly thingies and whatnot. Overall, it just feels really good in my hand, and the ballistics on that scroll wheel, whether it's gaming or productivity software, the thing just works like a champ.
By the way, Mark, because you mentioned using it on different machines, I do that also. You press the button, but one of the things that I'm most excited about with the upcoming Apple software release for Mac OS is what are they calling that? Oh goodness, universal something, Apple Universal. What is it called? Help me out here, guys. Apple Universal something.
Oh, what does it do?
It basically, here we go. Wait a second. Here we go. Universal control. So what it does is you can have two Macs or two Macs and an iPad, or a Mac and two iPads right next to each other. The computers somehow know that they're next to each other. And then you can use one Mac, and when you, one mouse, and when you drag that mouse to the edge of your first screen, it'll automatically switch to the second device. And then it'll automatically switch to the third device just based on where you have it. It's, I just think this is going to be
instant dual monitors or triple monitors.
It's going to be unbelievable. I just think
cool.
Here it is. Universal control. I just think it's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's not really extending the monitor as much as it's allowing the mouse to cross the boundaries, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's not extending the monitor at all. One of the killer features of it, though, is not only can you put your mouse on different computers or different screens, but you can just drag files from one computer to the other.
Nice.
Using this universal control.
Yeah. Really so I'm sitting in front of a PC with two monitors. I have a PC with two monitors next to me. I have a Mac next to me, another Mac down there, and a Linux laptop in between. And I use one mouse and one keyboard for all of them. And it's a Windows app called, well, it's Windows and the other platforms as well, but it's called Synergy. And Synergy works fantastic as well. It's just magical how they do it. It's just really, truly magical. But talk about, I mean, I've seen desks with 4 keyboards and 4 mice, and it really takes up a lot of space.
John Littleton.
That's cool.
AVM switch people, hello.
That's old school.
But I mean, you're really going to have 4 freaking...
That's the wired solution to KVM.
John but if you got 4 like on your desktop.
Yeah, yeah.
Just saying.
So I grew up with a IBM keyboard, so I love the full size keyboard switches. And when you were talking about
Clickies.
keyboards, I thought we would get into the fight, whether it's a blue key, a green key, a yellow key, which have different noise, different tactile. But
That's if
I
you're
found
built
my life was much better. I would travel with a keyboard to plug into it. So because I type so poorly that I need all the help I can get.
I was going to say that Apple keyboards are typically very quiet anyway. They're tactile. It's very soft tactilely. I don't need to be all clicky. And I have something that even dampens my keyboard even more, which is just a little a gel that sits on top of my keys to make them bigger for my blindness. So it's super quiet to type on this. I am definitely always bothered by hearing people's clickety.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I can imagine what it sounds like to you.
Exactly.
Right?
Did you fix your echo,
Leo,
Marty?
then Rupert. Leo, then Rupert.
Okay. So I'm going to jump on because I'm noticing the time, and I didn't know if you were going to be if you got your sound sorted. So I was going to jump on to just quickly go on to the what we talked about, which is the Stream Deck. So hopefully you can actually see this is my Stream Deck control, and I'm doing it live. So the Stream Deck you're actually seeing here is the control buttons for my actual Stream Deck. And what you may or not be able to do is work out where it says OH show. This is my button for when I'm going to be doing something where I'm going to demo. So if I go back to my top button, the top left is actually the live, is for me for eCam moving. I don't think you can quite work it out, but I am actually moving, and just where my cursor, just in the inside of that green, you could probably just about work out that I'm waving my hands, because the buttons on a Stream Deck are live. And what are these buttons doing? So you control it to do anything you want to do it. So this button here, which is this button here, is Zoom mute. And what I've got down there is I've got from Zoom a mute toggle. And that mute toggle, when you install that button on there, it actually mutes or unmutes you as you wish to do. The other ones that I use from Zoom are Zoom to turn on my camera, turn on and off my camera. So if I press that button, you will see my camera will disappear, and I'll turn it back on again. So that will turn my camera. And the third button, which is to do with Zoom, is the gallery. My other buttons down here, these ones are for Discord, to stop Discord, connect, so I can mute and open Discord. You can do anything you like with a Stream Deck. So if I change my profile so you can see it, and I look at the profiles for eCam, it'll actually, you can install any scene you like. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to actually delete this scene, or actually going to say run the scene, and I'm going to call it select an item, and it's going to be my main cam. So that puts in my main camera scene. So that will put in my cameras to do it. And I can choose my scenes to go next. I also use Audition, Adobe Audition a lot, and I have all the commands to actually do all the cutting and doing everything with it. But going back to my main profile, and the other bits that I have in here is, if I go in here, I've got buttons set up for an event. So this actually chooses in something called this is using Wirecast. Across the bottom, I'm able to select scenes in Wirecast, fire Wirecast, and then I can put, these are graphics that will appear on the screen when somebody does it. So why am I showing you this? Effectively, with a Stream Deck, it is creating really fast using, this is the native Stream Deck software, and I think Marty's going to show you a different way. It's a really fast way to choose anything on your computer and be able to select it and automate the delivery of something. And a simple thing when we go back to Zoom is, you can see if you look on that list of the Zoom things, as well as doing mute, videos, sharing, so I can do a share screen. I can also leave the meeting, and there is, I don't think there's actually a launch the live stream on Zoom. So there you go. That's what Stream Deck does. Marty, you're on mute.
Hey, we should probably address the question that's in the box right now, which might be where you're going to be headed, Marty. Do you see that question?
Yeah, we're going to interrupt this part of the discussion to answer a question, and
Okay.
please go ahead.
The question is, can someone elaborate on why ATEM Mini is not the route to stream via Zoom? Thanks. That was from Daniolo.
And the reason is because the ATEM Mini does have a streaming generator built into it, but is set up for one-way streaming. So it can connect to YouTube and a couple of other specific platforms that are built into the ATEM Mini. But because Zoom is a two-way platform, it has to connect, you have to connect to it through a computer. The Zoom client that you download and install and use to connect to the Zoom servers is a software device, is a software streaming platform. So you have to take your video output from the ATEM Mini, bring it into your computer, and use it as a webcam source into Zoom. So yeah, the ATEM Mini cannot connect directly to Zoom.
I will say, Marty, that if you do have a multi-camera setup in your sanctuary, that can plug via HDMI, or even if you're using PTZ cameras that may be SDI and you want to convert them, the ATEM Mini really is a fantastic, for me at least, it's a wonderful, easy switcher. I have a couple cameras connected and I can very easy, just by pressing buttons, switch back and forth between them. So the Stream Deck is fantastic for doing a million different things. But if you are looking for something and you just have maybe 2, 3, 4 cameras, or if you get the extreme, you could go up to 8 or more. If you're looking for a simple camera switcher, the ATEM Mini is a really wonderful tool, and it's really affordable.
Yeah, the ATEM Mini is a wonderful piece. It does so much for the money. Okay, great. Thanks for the question. And let's move back onto computer accessories. And let's continue on the Stream Deck. So I'm going to show my Stream Deck. And I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive here because I've got a little bit more going on. So this is my main Stream Deck page. And let's get that spotlighted if we can. Great, there we go. So I've got a bit going on here. Let's take a look at the interface first. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see all these different software applications and maybe even hardware applications. So there's the OBS Studio, right? So these are integrations that people have written, and the people at Elgato have written, that integrate the Stream Deck with these other applications that enable the Stream Deck to send commands to these other devices and software and receive status feedback from those same devices and software. So there's OBS Studio, there's OBS Tools, which is written by a different person. There's Stream Deck Elements, Stream Elements for OBS. There's here's a Stream Deck application in itself. So you open these things up and it shows you specific commands that you can load onto buttons. So what I've got here is these are different scenes that I've set up in OBS. So here's my head-on shot, which is me. And we'll go back to the Stream Deck. Fade to black. And this one here, last show I had set up some poll questions. So there's the poll question. Go back to here, there's the poll question. Just by pushing that. And then I have this one here is the window that we're looking at is a scene. These are all scenes to look at this screen capture that we have. And then I can switch between the Stream Deck and my companion, which we'll look at next. So these are two different sources within the same scene in OBS. And so I'm not changing scenes, but I'm changing sources within those scenes. Then I have over here is the logo that you see at the beginning and the end of the show, and several other scenes and things that are going on. And down at the bottom here, this is my Zoom microphone mute, my camera on and off like Leo was showing. This is a virtual camera on and off that is in OBS. So if I turn the camera off, you'll see the OBS logo, and then turn it back on and you see all my sources. This one here is my XR18, my Behringer audio mixer, which I'm using as an interface, an audio interface, to turn off the loudspeaker for when I'm using my in-ear speakers. And then I can mute the microphone channel in the XR18 that my microphone is connected to. So I actually have two ways to mute the microphone. I can mute it at the mixer, or I can mute it in Zoom. Now, some of these other black buttons here on the right, these are not Stream Deck buttons. These are companion buttons. So let's look at what that is. So there are certain integrations that are provided to us specifically for Stream Deck. And if we look down at the right channel, we see there's a voice meter and SoundPad and VLC, the media player. There are some Windows tools. There's this is a world time clock, and you see up here in the right corner, there's a clock there. That's what that is. And then there's Zoom that Leo showed us, and so you can see there's the microphone, the camera, a share toggle, share screen toggle, and a bunch of other functions that we can do in Zoom. But there are a lot of things that are missing from this list, and there are things that there are other things that we can do. So let's look at Companion. Those other buttons that I showed, those black buttons, those are built in Companion. Now, Companion is a third-party software that is built by a company called BitFocus, and it is specifically built to run on the Stream Deck to give you an alternate set of buttons and commands and feedback and things that you can do. And so there are also integrations that happen here. And I've just got to go to my screen so that I can look at this. So let's look at, I'm going to open this up a little bit. So now we can see the full companion screen. So on the left side is a representation of the button pad. On the right side is how we program these buttons. So I'm going to take this one right here, the XR18 microphone, and we're going to look and see what's here. So there's a button text name, so this is what the button says, and there's the font size, which is automatic. There's the surface controller. So when I look at this, I'm selecting the Elgato Stream Deck plugin, and yep, and down here, okay, so that's one thing. I'm sorry, that doesn't look right. All right, what's important is this one down here. We're selecting the X-Air mute channel, and I'm selecting channels 1 to 16 because they come in banks, and I'm specifically selecting channel number 5, and the mute and unmute is on a toggle so that when I push the button and I push it again, it mutes and then unmutes. But let's look at, I want to go back and look at the Stream Deck because I want to show you how we program this and what the variables are. So I'm going to select a blank button. We'll look at this one right here. And let me choose. Okay. Let me choose.
Hey, Marty, I apologize for butting in here, but we're 10 minutes 10 to show. So.
Okay.
Choose Zoom.
Choose Zoom. Okay, we can choose
That was
Zoom.
what and then we should wrap it up.
All right. So I'll put a share toggle. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to just drag it over to a button. And now it gives me certain fields. I can write in a title. So I'll say share. And it's going to ask me for the meeting menu. So something I'm typing in there. And then start share menu. So there are things that I would enter in here related to the specific meeting that I'm in and the share screen that I want to do. Let's look at a different one that we can look more specifically at. So I'm going to take this and we're going to select that and we're going to delete it. Let's take the mute toggle. We'll put another mute in there. And so we'll say mute. And then I have the ability to change the icon. So I can, if I have an icon that's in a file on my computer, I can select that. I can create a brand new icon using Elgato's software, and I can open up the Stream Deck icon library. So we're going to do that. And I don't know if you won't be able to see this. So there's a whole list of icons that you have to choose from just by pushing that button. And I can select, anything. I'll put a button in here. So you'll see that there's a little robot face there, and but the word mute is not very visible. It's really small. So I'm going to press this little button here, and it allows me to change the text size, right? And I can change the color, and I can position it at the bottom, the middle, or the top. Instead of an icon, if I want to put a solid color in there, I can do that. And there are two different states for when the button is active or inactive. And I can put a different icon or a different color in there so that I know what's going on. So for instance, when I turn my speaker on and off, you can see that it changes color for when the speaker is on, for when the speaker is off. And there's a little yellow bar at the top. Yep, you can see that it's changing. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. It knows when you've pushed the button, or it knows when the state of the software has changed. So that's very cool. And now in Companion, it's a whole different ballgame. And it sounds like we're running out of time. We can cover Companion for another stretch of time. And I think we'll do that on another show. But what's to know about Companion is, let me just go over to that screen again. And I'll go over to this. Now here's the list of integrations that you can capture and utilize in Companion. So these are all different manufacturers and different models of equipment. So there's Allen and Heath mixing consoles, there's AJA video processing equipment, Analog Way. We'll go down here and we'll find the Behringer mixers, the Behringer and Miters mixers, the XR18s, the X32s, the XAirs, all of those. There's Blackmagic design, the HyperDecks, there's an ATEM, there's the ATEM right there. And when you add these, and these are the ones here that I've added, you can take a look at, you can assign the IP address so you can actually control this on another computer. So If you have software that's on another computer, you can still control it because you'll enter in the IP address of that computer and the IP port. So it allows you to do that. And you can also get a list of all of the commands that are available in that integration. So there's lots and lots and lots of things you can do here. Many more possible integrations than just using the Stream Deck software. So that's an introduction into the Stream Deck and the companion.
That was interesting. Thank you. I like that.
Are
We'll do
there
another
any?
show on that though, for sure, because I know people
Absolutely, we
really
can
want to
do
know that.
2 or 3 shows on this.
Sure.
Are there any other questions that we want to look at?
Check. Let me see. I'm not
I was
sure.
gonna say
Oh,
I saw a sneaky hand go up real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody on the panel?
Was that does Rupert had his hand up? I think.
That was me. I just maybe it's for a different show, but I mean we had really extensive looks at the Stream Deck software there, but only at the beginning did we catch a glimpse of the Stream Deck itself, as in the hardware. It might be useful, maybe at a later point, to explain how they are available in different sizes and even different versions, I guess now by this time, and really how you interact with it at a hardware level as well as the software.
Yes, there are differences.
You interact with them, Rupert, by pressing the buttons.
Mark is showing the 15 button,
And yeah,
David is showing
David
both the
showed
32 and the
Right.
15
There
button.
you go.
Leo has one. I showed my 32 button here. I also have a 15 button that I use portably. There's Jeff's, and he's got his in coordinated colors.
I packed mine up earlier today.
That's
Went out
what
to
we
the party.
That's what we were
Right?
missing.
There's Henry's. And
Henry
you know
got one. Yay, Henry.
Henry's got one. And you know what's really cool about these? You know, they're really
Well, let me
functional
see.
and they're fabulous and they really make things quick work. But when you're not using them, you could do screensavers on them. You could do pretty pictures that, are animated. You can do all kinds of cool
Art.
things with them.
art and cats.
You can do art. You can put
cats.
your own art on them. Yeah, you can turn them into an audio meter, spectrum analyzer.
Awesome.
They're
That's
very cool. They're very, very cool.
I think that the question that was in the box was only about you presenting your screen, Marty. So I don't think it's valid to ask that question. It was they wanted a better resolution of what you were showing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I had made that screen that I was showing, that window that I was showing, if I had full screened it on my monitor, it would have been at a higher resolution. Should have asked me that. Could have asked me that.
Limitation by any chance?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that a limitation of a PC?
No, it's not a limitation of a PC. So what happens when you're doing a
Marty,
window share?
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I was poking. I was Apple poking.
Oh, no, that happens on any computer. It's a matter of you're showing a portion of the screen and not the entire screen. So you're only getting the resolution that's related to that portion of the screen.
I was just
Marty, I actually think in this case, it has more to do with Zoom because you're using a virtual camera to come in, and the virtual camera, you're going to get lower resolution than if you were to do a screen share in Zoom. So for example, if I screen share now and I go, I'll pull this up. So this is going to be a better, am I screen sharing, by the way? I think I am, yes.
Are you screen sharing your entire screen, or are you sharing
So what I'm doing is I'm pushing my virtual camera, as it were, out to a separate monitor, and then I'm screen sharing that monitor, as opposed to just using the virtual camera in Ecamm. If I turn screen sharing off, you can probably still see the same thing, but the quality is probably not as good on the text because it's just a virtual camera versus a screen share. So that's actually I don't know if it's a bug or a feature in Zoom, but it's.
So you do get the higher resolution when you're doing screen share, but your frame rate will be lower. So it's good for text, but not so good for moving images.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I was doing was,
Yeah, it's a little blurry.
so this is, I'm sending this through OBS. So, and the window that we're looking at, the Stream Deck window, is maybe 1/4 of my entire screen. If I make it full screen,
It's still blurry though.
it's still
For me.
blurry?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
For me.
maybe that's it. Let me see what I have here in terms of, no, I don't have any resolution control here.
That's only going to be coming through to us at 720 though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're only at the entire show is at 720.
Yeah. So that's probably the difference.
But however, if I go into Zoom and I do a screen share of that screen, does that look any different?
That's
a little
significantly
clearer.
crisper.
Yeah, significantly crisper. Okay, good. So that's good. Yeah, because Zoom actually gives a higher resolution priority to screen shares than it does to virtual cameras. That's a good point.
Or any camera. It's not a distinction to virtual cameras.
Right.
If it,
True.
Yeah.
True. Mm-hmm.
I request a show on Ecamm.
Showing a cam would be good.
Noted, right? That's all.
Yeah.
Put it in the Discord, girl. You know the
Yeah,
drill.
yeah. I got you. I got to find the right channel.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
make
Put it
sure.
into the poll questions from last show. So let's talk a little bit about, what we talked about last show was the future of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum, and we got some really, really good feedback. I want to thank everybody who came and attended and participated. It's pretty clear to me that, while last season we talked about starting up this build out, we're starting out with why do we want to webcast for live from the sanctuary, and how, and is it one way, is it two way, and how many cameras do we need, and how we interface audio. And it was very hardware and equipment oriented in terms of what do we buy and how do we buy it and who does install it and how do we configure it and all that. Well, this coming season, a lot of us, a lot of you will have either on your way to having the equipment installed, or you will have already had it installed. Either way, we're going to need to start talking about how to operate the equipment. How do I choose what camera shot, what camera angle, and when do I switch it? And how do I make the picture look better from my camera? And, how do I mix audio? And what kind of transitions are appropriate? When do I show this picture versus that picture? How do I make my web stream really look good? There are a lot of different techniques and tools that can be used that professionals spend their entire career learning. And we're all trying to pick this up and learn it, in a couple of months. And as I say in the beginning of the show, it's a deep area of continuing study and learning. But we want to try and do it in as compressed a time as possible because, well, we're only doing it one day a week, right? And we don't want to spend the rest of the week in study hall. And so we're trying to figure out, well, let's find the most important lessons that we can learn and try and learn them as easily as we can. So that's where I think the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum is going. And so we have a wonderful panel of experts here, people who have been in the professional production industry for many, many, many years, who have learned all this stuff and will help us boil it down, and will share their knowledge and their expertise and do some demonstrations for us, look at the actual equipment that we're going to be using, learn what to look for and what to listen for, and how to identify what needs improvement, and how we can make those improvements quickly and effectively, and what tools we can use to help us identify those things and help us identify what constitutes a good looking show, what constitutes a good sounding show. So that's where I think we're going, and there may be some additional improvements that we make to the show technically and in the way it's organized. We're looking forward to working on some of those things. So thank you very much, everyone, and let me get back to
See you on
something that I
September
need-
16th, right, Marty? Next
So
September 16th.
our next show is going to be on September 16th, and we'll be here in the same place, same time, same bat channel, and we'll pick it up from there. If there's anything that is pressing to you, any stumbling blocks that you're trying to navigate your way around, let us know what they are, so that we can add them to our topics list. And know that we are all available to you on the Discord all week long. If you have any questions, want to bring something up, want to talk about something, hop onto the Discord, find the right channel, and put it in there. We will get notified about it, and we'll be happy to engage with you. That's what we're here for. And so thank you to all of our panelists and our guests for such a wonderful conversation today. This has been a really good show. I hope that you've all enjoyed our time together and found it informative, enlightening, enriching, energizing, and motivating. Watch the Discord for upcoming shows and announcements and where you can find recordings of these shows. Most of the shows are available publicly on YouTube, except for the latest 3. We reserve those for our guests and our members, and I post links to those in the Discord specifically for you. So, while video production has been going on for decades, for the House of Worship community, for us, this is brand new territory that we're all exploring together for the first time, which means that we get to redefine what church is, or what it can be, and find new models and scale it up or scale it down. We have small congregations, we have large congregations, everybody has their own needs, and we can figure out what works best for everybody. So make it your own. Reinvent your ministries. Think about who your communities are, how you can reach them, because you can now reach so many more people than you ever could before. So dare to dream it, right? Thank you very much. Stick around for the after show.